It started with a single anonymous tip, a message sent to Internal Affairs about a shipment of opioids that vanished before reaching the evidence locker. At first, no one wanted to believe it. Greenville was a quiet Texas town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and the police were supposed to be the good guys. But within weeks, that illusion started to crack. Investigators discovered that several officers had filed reports about drug seizures that never seemed to make it to the warehouse. The paperwork looked perfect. The evidence just didn't exist. Then came the whisper that changed everything. A name, a judge. Raymond Keller, the man who had spent 23 years presiding over Greenville's courthouse, was suddenly the focus of a corruption probe, and what investigators would soon uncover would shock the entire state. The first clue came from a street dealer, already facing 10 years behind bars. He told detectives that the drugs he sold didn't come from Mexico, they came from inside the police department, relabeled, repackaged, and distributed under the radar. It sounded impossible, but when agents cross-checked batch numbers on seized opioids, the results lined up. The same cereals appeared in cartel shipments seized hundreds of miles away. Something or someone was moving narcotics out of police custody and into cartel hands. That was when Internal Affairs quietly launched what they called Operation Blind Justice. Surveillance teams followed officers after their shifts. Phone records were traced. Unmarked cars were spotted making late-night stops at abandoned warehouses near the county line. Piece by piece, the pattern formed. 21 officers, all tied to one man, Judge Keller. To the public, Keller was a respected figure, churchgoer, family man, a pillar of Greenville's justice system. But behind the scenes, he was untouchable. He'd signed off on every warrant that allowed these officers to operate. He oversaw the court cases that mysteriously disappeared before trial. And when reporters asked about the missing drugs, Keller called it a bookkeeping error. But the truth was far more sinister. Investigators learned that Keller had personal ties to a shell company in El Paso, a trucking business that didn't ship produce, like its paperwork claimed. It shipped pills. Those shipments were moving north, using police escorts to pass through checkpoints. Each officer earned a quiet bonus for their loyalty, and Keller made sure none of them were ever questioned. Everything changed on the morning of April 7th at 4:38 a.m. Federal agents executed a search warrant at Keller's home. What they found inside left them speechless. Hidden beneath the floorboards of his study were boxes of unmarked opioid tablets, tens of thousands of them. In his garage, more boxes, this time filled with cash, nearly $2 million in bundled bills. On his desk, agents found case files marked sealed files connected to cartel suspects who had walked free under Keller's rulings. The judge's fingerprints were on drug packaging recovered from a warehouse 2 counties away. The paper trail was complete. Later that same day, simultaneous raids took place across Greenville County. 21 officers were arrested before sunrise, 2 sergeants, a lieutenant, and even the department's own chief of patrol. Neighbors watched in disbelief as uniformed men were led away in handcuffs. The news spread like wildfire. Greenville's most trusted defenders were now its biggest criminals. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. The police department went into lockdown. When Keller was brought in for questioning, he didn't flinch. He didn't deny a thing. His only words were, "You don't know who you're dealing with." Over the next several weeks, the investigation grew even darker. Bank records revealed offshore accounts linked to Keller and several officers. Money had been moving through dummy charities and land trusts for years. One officer broke down during interrogation, admitting that the cartel had promised protection and threatened anyone who tried to leave. Some claimed they were forced. Others said greed got the better of them. But the pattern was clear. The cartel didn't need to fight law enforcement. It had already boarded. As court proceedings began, the town of Greenville descended into chaos. Hundreds of criminal cases, many overseen by Keller, were thrown into question. Convictions were overturned. Evidence was dismissed. Victims demanded new trials. Families filled the courthouse steps, holding signs that read "Justice for Greenville" and "Who can we trust?" The governor ordered a full review of every case Keller had ever touched. It turned out that dozens of violent offenders had received mysteriously lenient sentences. The damage rippled across the state. For the first time, people began to wonder, if corruption could reach a courtroom, what hope did ordinary citizens have? When Keller's trial finally began, it was broadcast live. He arrived in a gray suit, shackled, but still wearing the calm expression he'd used from the bench. Prosecutors presented thousands of pages of evidence, cash transfers, phone logs, and testimonies from his own officers. The courtroom was silent when the recordings played. Keller's voice could be heard coordinating shipments, setting payment amounts, and warning officers to keep the paperwork clean. For many watching, that was the moment the illusion of justice shattered. In the end, the jury took less than 4 hours to decide. Guilty, on all counts, Judge Raymond Keller was sentenced to life in federal prison. The officers faced a range of sentences from 5 years to life, depending on their roles. Some testified against Keller in exchange for reduced time. Others refused to speak at all. But for the people of Greenville, no sentence felt like enough. Months later, the town still hadn't recovered. The courthouse sat empty, a symbol of everything that went wrong. New officers were hired, but residents looked at them with quiet suspicion. Every siren, every badge, carried a shadow. For many, justice had become just another word, a promise too easy to break. And as for Keller, from his prison cell, he's said to spend his days writing letters, not to his family, not to his lawyers, but to the few officers who never got caught. The investigation remains open. Authorities believe others may still be out there, operating under new names, in new towns, carrying on the same dirty work. In the end, Greenville learned a painful truth. Corruption doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a badge. Sometimes it wears a robe. And sometimes it hides behind the very laws it breaks. Because justice isn't blind. It just refuses to look when the guilty write the rules.